Would you take a job with one rule? Follow every instruction, no questions asked? Alvin Mercer thought $35.00 an hour was a blessing. But behind the neon glow of Redwood Diner lurked something ancient, hungry, and patient. Every shift revealed new rules, new horrors, faces that shouldn't exist, voices that shouldn't know his name. And worst of all, the haunting realization that he may have never applied for the job at all. Tonight, we step inside a place where forgetting isn't a mistake. It's survival. Welcome to the rules of Redwood Diner. The neon sign buzzed weakly above the door, flickering like a dying heartbeat against the black Nevada sky. Redwood Diner, open 24/7. The red and white glow pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm, as if warning me one last time before I stepped inside. I hesitated, keys clenched tightly in my palm, listening to the hollow wind whisper across the empty parking lot. Only my battered sedan and one rusted pickup truck occupied the vast lot, both equally insignificant against the endless desert. The door creaked open with a stubborn groan, announcing my arrival into the stillness. I expected the familiar scent of frying oil, stale coffee, and the low murmur of late-night truckers swapping stories. Instead, silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums, waiting for you to break it. Inside, the diner looked exactly as it had the afternoon I interviewed here. A snapshot frozen in time. Vinyl booths lined the windows, chrome fixtures reflected the dim overhead bulbs, and an old jukebox stood dormant in the corner like a forgotten relic. Behind the counter stood Mr. Traldi. He didn't greet me. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, followed my every movement as I approached. His thin frame was draped in a perfectly pressed dark suit, far too formal for a man who ran a roadside diner. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone. It was the same face that had calmly handed me the list of rules only a few days ago. "You made it," he finally said, voice smooth and deliberate. "Right on time." I swallowed. "Yes, sir." He gestured toward the punch clock mounted on the wall. Its face gleamed beneath the fluorescent light, the slot beneath it yawning like a mouth hungry for time cards. My card was already inserted into the slot, labeled simply Mercer, Alvin. I pressed the card into the machine and heard a soft mechanical clunk as it stamped my starting hour. "Remember," Traldi continued without moving, "the rules are not suggestions." I nodded, my stomach twisting slightly. The rules. The damn rules. They were printed neatly, typewritten on yellowed paper that smelled faintly of mildew. "Do not, under any circumstance, allow the man in the brown coat to enter the diner. If the jukebox begins playing, stop everything and listen until it finishes. Should you see a woman in a yellow dress sitting at table 5, bring her a glass of water. Do not make eye contact. Do not enter the walk-in freezer between 2:17 and 2:34 a.m. If you hear knocking, do not answer. If the landline rings, answer immediately. Listen carefully and follow instructions precisely. Some customers are real, others are not. If uncertain, check their hands. Real customers have fingerprints. Leave before sunrise. Failure to clock out before dawn means you belong to the diner." Even now, my eyes instinctively flicked to my breast pocket, where the folded list rested like a strange kind of talisman. I had read it a dozen times since signing my name at the bottom, and yet, no matter how many times I reread the rules, none of them made any more sense than they had that first night. Traldi gave a short nod, as if satisfied that I would comply. Without another word, he turned and vanished into his office behind the counter, the door shutting with a muted click. I was alone. The first hour passed quietly. I cleaned tables that didn't need cleaning, refilled salt shakers, rearranged condiments, and wiped down the gleaming countertop. The steady hum of the refrigeration units provided the only background noise, a low, persistent drone that seemed to pulse just slightly out of sync with my heartbeat. Sometime after midnight, a lone trucker entered. Tall, silver-haired, his packer's cap pulled low. He ordered black coffee and a grilled cheese to go, The transaction was wordless, routine, almost mechanical. He paid in exact cash, avoided eye contact, and was gone within minutes, leaving me alone once more. For a moment I wondered if perhaps this place wasn't as strange as it seemed. Maybe the rules were just a bizarre hazing ritual. But that hope didn't last long. At exactly 1:12 IOM, the jukebox, which had been utterly silent until now, whirred to life. Its neon-lit face glowed faintly, casting shifting colors against the chrome surfaces. A soft hiss preceded the music. An old tune, warped and distant, as though playing from a forgotten radio station lost in time. The moment the first note played, my body froze. Not out of fear, but because something deeper took hold. A heaviness settled over me, as if invisible hands were pressing down on my shoulders. My breathing slowed, my muscles locked. I remembered the rule. If the jukebox begins playing, stop everything and listen until it finishes. With deliberate care, I set down the coffee pot I had been holding and turned toward the jukebox. The song was unfamiliar, yet it hummed with a sickly sweetness that tugged at the edges of my memory, like a lullaby you once knew as a child but had since buried under layers of forgotten nightmares. Time slipped away as the melody drifted through the air, notes stretched unnaturally, bending like metal warped by intense heat, my eyes unfocused. The diner's soft overhead lights seemed dimmer, colors dulling like an old photograph left too long in the sun. When the final note trembled into silence, I blinked and realized I was no longer standing behind the counter. I was at the front door. I hadn't walked here. I didn't remember moving. My hand hovered inches from the lock, as if drawn by something unseen, compelled like a moth circling a flame. Heart pounding, I pulled my hand back, stumbling a step away from the door. My breath quickened, cold sweat beading at the back of my neck. That's when the phone rang. The harsh mechanical bell shattered the stillness like a blade. The landline mounted on the wall near the office. A heavy black receiver from a bygone era vibrated with each sharp ring. I didn't want to answer. Every instinct screamed at me not to, but I remembered the rule. If the landline rings, answer immediately. Listen carefully and follow instructions precisely. I forced my legs forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The receiver was ice cold against my ear. For a heartbeat, there was only static. Then, a voice. Dry, thin, like aged parchment being torn, spoke. Flip the sign. Close it. Now. I swallowed hard. What? The voice sharpened. Do it! Immediately. Before I could think, my hand shot out and grabbed the open sign hanging in the window. I flipped it to close. No more than 3 seconds later, something struck the glass door with a force that made me jump back, nearly dropping the phone. I turned, my skin crawling, and saw a tall figure standing just beyond the neon glow. The figure outside the glass door didn't move. Its shoulders were broad, posture rigid, as though it had been standing there for hours, patiently waiting for someone to notice. The man wore a brown coat, long, heavy, its fabric coated in a fine layer of dust or ash. The neon light flickered above him, causing the edges of his silhouette to stutter unnaturally, like bad footage from an old surveillance camera. I couldn't see his face. The angle of the neon light cast deep shadows across his features, but I could feel his stare, drilling into me through the glass. The air inside the diner suddenly felt heavier, like something had been sucked out of the room and left a vacuum in its place. My breathing grew shallow. Then he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his right hand and pressed it flat against the glass. His fingers spread wide, palm open. I stared, not at his face, but at his hand. No fingerprints, no creases, no wrinkles, just smooth, pale skin that resembled wax more than flesh. My stomach twisted. The rule flashed like a strobe light in my mind. Do not, under any circumstance, allow the man in the brown coat to enter the diner. The landline, now silent, hung useless in my hand. I lowered it slowly, setting it back into its cradle without breaking my gaze from the man. A sharp rhythmic tapping followed, his fingers drumming softly, patiently against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then he spoke. "Alvin," he called, voice muffled by the thick pain, yet perfectly clear as if he were standing right beside me. "Let me in." My legs trembled, my feet rooted to the floor. He said my name. I hadn't told anyone my name except Trolldy. The figure leaned forward slightly, his shadow stretching across the linoleum. "It's cold out here, Alvin. Open the door. Just for a moment." The voice didn't match the setting. It was calm, almost friendly, tinged with familiarity. It was like someone I once knew. "You don't remember me, do you?" the man asked, tilting his head. "But I remember you." I forced myself a step backward. The tapping stopped. "Please," he continued, still gentle, almost pitiful. "You don't have to be afraid. I can help you." His words slithered into my mind, trying to take root. My fingers twitched involuntarily toward the door latch before I snapped them back. Clutching my hands together as tightly as I could, he saw my hesitation and pressed closer to the glass. "It's okay, Alvin. You don't belong here. You shouldn't have taken this job. Let me take you somewhere safe." The diner lights flickered again, the bulbs above me dimming for a brief second before returning to their steady hum. I whispered under my breath, voice quivering, "No." As if reacting to my defiance, the man's head straightened. His calm demeanor fractured for the first time. His next words came slower, deliberate, measured threats, masked as concern. "You don't understand, Alvin. There are worse things waiting for you inside. Things that won't offer you this kindness." I swallowed hard. The back of my throat burned as panic clawed its way upward. My vision narrowed, and a strange ringing filled my ears. He pressed his forehead against the glass now, skin pale and tight, though his features remained frustratingly concealed by shadow. His breath didn't fog the glass like it should have. "You still don't remember," he said softly, almost to himself this time. "But you will." The lights behind me buzzed louder, vibrating with growing intensity as the entire diner seemed to shudder under some unseen weight. The overhead clock ticked forward toward 3:00 a.m. The air temperature dropped sharply. My breath crystallized in front of me. Still, the man did not move. I realized that I was locked in a silent battle of willpower, not with him, but with myself. Some part of me, deep and primal, wanted to open that door, wanted to trust him, wanted to believe his promises. But the rules weren't written for my comfort. They were written for my survival. I clamped my eyes shut for several seconds, willing my body to obey the single thought pulsing in my head. "Don't move. Don't listen." When I opened my eyes again, the man was gone. No trace remained, not a footprint in the thin layer of dust on the asphalt outside, not even a smudge where his hand had pressed against the glass. The neon sign buzzed softly once more, flickering as though exhaling after holding its breath. I didn't dare exhale. The quiet returned, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. My hands trembled as I braced myself against the counter for support. My pulse hammered in my ears. The phone remained silent. The jukebox stood dormant. The freezer door stayed shut. All was still. Behind me, the office door creaked open. Trolldy stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable as always. How long he had been watching, I couldn't say, but I knew he had seen everything. "You handled that well," he said simply. I swallowed, unable to form a reply. My throat was too dry to speak. Trolldy stepped into the diner, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor as he crossed toward the counter. He stopped beside me, observing my ashen face with detached curiosity. "What would have happened?" I finally rasped. "If I had opened the door." His gaze held mine for a moment longer than comfortable, then, almost gently, he answered, "You don't want to know." He patted the counter once before returning to his office, shutting the door quietly behind him. I remained there, frozen in place for the remainder of my shift. The rest of the night passed without incident, but the weight of what I had experienced clung to me like a second skin. Even when the sun finally began to rise and my shift ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man in the brown coat hadn't truly left. He was still out there, somewhere, waiting. As I clocked out, my hand hesitated briefly before punching the time card into the machine. The mechanical clunk sounded far louder than usual, echoing through my head. Driving home, the sunrise felt cold instead of warm. Every shadow along the highway seemed to stretch unnaturally long, as though reaching for my car. And as exhausted as I was, sleep never came. That night was only the beginning. The second night felt heavier. The sun dipped below the distant mountains like it was trying to flee the darkness chasing after it. As my car pulled into the empty lot of Redwood Diner, the familiar buzz of the neon sign welcomed me with its erratic flicker. The glow seemed weaker tonight, or maybe I was just seeing it differently after what happened. I sat behind the wheel longer than I should have, staring at the front door. The events of last night played on repeat in my mind. The man in the brown coat, his voice, the way his hand pressed against the glass without a single line, smooth like polished marble. And that moment when I almost moved, almost reached for the door handle, I could still hear his voice if I let myself slip. "You don't belong here, Alvin." But here I was, back again, because what other choice did I have? The bills stacked up. My savings had already bled dry. There was no other work, and besides, the rules had worked, hadn't they? I had followed them. I had survived. The thought felt like a small comfort I wasn't sure I should allow myself. With a deep breath, I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the door, pulling it open to that same stale, sterile quiet. The diner hadn't changed. The booths remained empty, the chrome fixtures still gleamed under the flickering bulbs, and the air still smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. Behind the counter, as if he had never left, stood Mr. Traldi, his suit as crisp as ever, his face as unreadable as stone. "You're here," he said with a nod. I clocked in, sliding my card into the machine and listening to the familiar clunk that had started to sound less like routine and more like ritual. My name, printed neatly on the card, felt oddly detached from me, as if Alvin Mercer was someone else entirely, someone who wasn't standing here replaying a conversation with an impossible man at the glass door. Traldi offered no small talk, no further instructions. He simply turned and walked back into his office, door closing softly behind him. The shift began like the one before, wiping down spotless counters, aligning ketchup bottles, and restocking napkin holders that didn't need restocking. The hours dragged in that unnatural silence that had started to feel too thick, too intentional. Even the buzz of the refrigeration unit sounded distant tonight, like they were humming just a half second behind reality. Shortly after midnight, a familiar pattern resumed. A trucker wandered in. He looked like the one from the night before, though I wasn't sure. Same build, same worn cap, same downturned eyes avoiding mine. He ordered black coffee and grilled cheese without speaking more than a word. Exact cash, no tip, gone within minutes. It was almost comforting. Almost. Then, as the clock ticked past 1:10, my body stiffened. I knew what was coming. At precisely 1:12, and the jukebox whirred to life once more. The lights inside it glowed with that sickly rotating color wheel, spinning under the chrome like some hypnotic eye. The song that played this time was different, slower. The melody hung heavy in the air, like it was being dragged across broken glass. The vocals were warped, too slow to sound human, too off-key to recognize. It almost sounded like a memory I never had. My body locked instinctively. The rule was clear: stop everything. Listen until it finishes. I focused on the music, my breathing shallow, heartbeat steady, as the dissonant tune crawled across the linoleum floor toward me. Minutes stretched into something longer than minutes, when the final warbled note sputtered out and the jukebox powered down with a soft click. I exhaled slowly, and that's when she arrived. The small bell above the door chimed gently, but I hadn't seen the door open. She was simply there, the woman in the yellow dress. Table 5 was hers, as if it had always belonged to her. She sat gracefully, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Her dress was vintage, sunshine yellow with a white collar pressed perfectly, like she'd stepped out of an old photograph. Her posture was rigid, almost too perfect, like a mannequin posed by invisible strings. I froze again. The third rule screamed in my mind. If you see the woman in the yellow dress at table 5, bring her a glass of water. Do not make eye contact. I forced my hands into motion, reaching for the nearest clean glass. My fingers trembled as I filled it at the soda fountain, careful not to spill a drop. The sound of the water pouring into the glass echoed far too loudly in the otherwise silent diner. Don't look. That was the only thought pounding in my skull. With the glass carefully balanced in my hand, I approached her table, my gaze locked firmly on the chipped surface of the wooden tabletop. The light above her flickered slightly as I neared. My breath came in shallow, controlled bursts. I carefully set the glass of water in front of her without a word and immediately turned to walk away. But I made a mistake. Curiosity. A moment of weakness, a reflex I couldn't suppress. My eyes lifted, and I saw her. Her face was smiling, but it wasn't human. The smile stretched impossibly wide, pulling at the edges of her skin as though her flesh were made of elastic. The corners of her mouth reached well past where any human mouth should end, extending almost to her ears. Her eyes, wide, glassy, unblinking, stared directly into mine the instant our gazes met. A wave of cold washed over my entire body, locking my joints as my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. My knees nearly buckled, but I managed to stumble backward, gripping the counter for support. She didn't move. She simply smiled, wider, impossibly wider. Her lips quivered as if she were on the edge of speaking, but no words came. Only that smile remained, fixed, monstrous. I shut my eyes, desperate to break the contact. My breathing came ragged, heart hammering against my ribs. I dared not open my eyes for several long seconds, praying that when I did, she'd be gone. When I finally opened them again, she was. The table was empty. The glass of water sat untouched, still perfectly full as if it had never been disturbed. I stood there, gripping the counter until my knuckles turned white. My pulse still thundered in my ears, and my legs threatened to give out beneath me. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement behind the office door. Trolley was watching again. He hadn't stepped out. He hadn't intervened. He was simply there, as if he'd known exactly how this would unfold. And he knew I had broken the rule. The rest of my shift passed like a hollow dream. Nothing else came through that door. No more truckers, no more music from the jukebox, no more phone calls. Only the dull hum of the refrigeration units and the flickering light above table 5 kept me company through the long silent hours. But my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I had broken a rule. I had looked at her. And yet, I was still here. That fact gnawed at me more than anything. The rules were absolute, weren't they? They weren't warnings. They were laws, like gravity, immutable. And yet I had broken one and still remained alive, or maybe not alive in the way I thought. The thought slithered into my head and coiled tight. When dawn approached, Traldi finally emerged from his office. He didn't speak at first. He simply stood there for a moment, his eyes fixed on me as if calculating something. His presence felt heavier than usual, like he carried some unspoken weight into the room along with him. "You survived," he said at last, his voice low, almost disappointed. I swallowed. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. He stepped closer, his shoes tapping softly against the linoleum floor. I could hear the clock ticking toward my shift's end behind him. "But you're still here," he added, tilting his head slightly. "That's interesting." There was no comfort in his words. If anything, it felt like I had just stumbled onto a balance beam, blindfolded, with no knowledge of how close I stood to the edge. "What happens to the ones who don't follow the rules?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. For a long moment, he simply stared, as if weighing whether I even deserved an answer. "They don't leave," he said finally. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The weight of those 3 words settled in my chest like wet cement. I clocked out and left without another word. The drive home was worse than the night before. The sun felt even colder. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Every mile between me and that diner felt stretched, warped, as though I was driving through a world that no longer fit properly around me. When I got back to my apartment, sleep didn't come. I didn't expect it to. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the cheap beige carpet as my thoughts spun in circles. I kept seeing her face, her smile. Every time I blinked, my stomach twisted each time the image returned, as if some part of me wasn't sure if I had actually seen it, or if my mind had already started slipping. But the glass of water was real, untouched, full. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper. The rules, my lifeline, my curse. I read them again, eyes scanning each word like they might rearrange themselves into some hidden meaning I had missed. They didn't. The rules were clear, and I had already broken one. The knock on my door came unexpectedly late that afternoon, long after I'd given up hope of resting. My body jerked upright, a cold sweat instantly breaking across my forehead. 3 knocks. Even, measured. I approached the door slowly, every step laced with dread. When I opened it, no one was there. Only a small envelope rested on the doormat, plain and unmarked. I picked it up with trembling fingers and tore it open. Inside was cash. More than what I had earned for one shift. More than I should have received. Neatly counted bills, crisp, fresh. No note, no explanation, just money. The diner was paying me, rewarding me for coming back. Or maybe encouraging me not to leave. For the first time since starting this job, the thought fully bloomed in my mind. It doesn't want me to leave. Not yet. That night, against every screaming instinct, I returned. The neon sign greeted me like an old friend, its flickering light steadying into its rhythmic pulse as I parked and stepped out. The diner stood exactly as it had before, unchanged, timeless, patient. Inside, Traldi was already waiting, standing behind the counter like he always had, as though the hours between my shifts didn't exist at all. "You came back," he said, as though mildly surprised. I wanted to answer, to ask 1,000 questions, but the words jammed in my throat. I simply nodded and clocked in. The moment the time card stamped my arrival, the familiar weight settled over my chest again. Routine resumed. Cleaning, rearranging, pretending this was normal. But something felt different. The air seemed thicker tonight, the lights dimmer, the hum of the refrigeration unit pitched slightly higher, almost like a low, droning whine beneath the surface of everything. Then, right on cue, at 1:12 IMM, the jukebox powered up again. The song this time was neither sweet nor slow. It was wrong. The notes warped into something unrecognizable, as if someone were dragging a needle across melting vinyl. The voice behind the music sounded almost human, but not quite. It reminded me of a voice trying to mimic familiarity but failing to land the tone. Like hearing your name said by someone who shouldn't know it. I froze, obeying the rule. The song played far longer than the previous nights, its final notes hanging in the air long after they should have faded. And then, without warning, the bell above the door chimed again. The woman in yellow returned. She moved the same way as before, graceful, deliberate, almost choreographed. Her dress flawless, her hands folded neatly in her lap at table 5. But tonight, something had shifted. The air around her felt heavier, darker. She was waiting. I prepared her water with care, controlling my breath, every muscle tensed as I approached her table. I set the glass down without looking, focusing only on the cracks in the tabletop, counting each one like a prayer. I didn't look at her this time, but as I turned to walk away, I felt it. Her gaze, following me, burning into my back. The temperature around me dropped noticeably, frost blooming faintly on the metal counter as I reached safety behind it. I stood still, my back to her, muscles locked, refusing to turn. That's when I heard it. A soft scrape, the sound of glass sliding gently across wood. I dared a glance toward the reflection in the chrome napkin holder on the counter. The glass of water was moving, sliding across the table slowly, as if pushed by an invisible hand, stopping precisely at the edge before freezing in place. She wanted me to know she was still watching. I closed my eyes and waited for dawn. By the third night, I was no longer sure where the fear ended and the resignation began. I pulled into the parking lot just before my shift, the sky above washed in ink-back clouds that pressed unnaturally low. Even the air smelled different, like metal, like something old rising to the surface after years of being buried. The neon sign sputtered its tired pulse, but tonight its flicker was more erratic, as if it struggled to stay alive. As I stepped out of the car, a sharp gust of wind cut across the lot, carrying with it a faint, almost chemical sweetness. My stomach churned at the scent. Inside, the diner stood waiting, silent, still, expectant. The booths sat in perfect order. The counter gleamed under flickering fluorescent tubes. The old jukebox loomed in the corner like a forgotten sentry, its glass face catching brief shards of reflected light. And as always, Traldi was there behind the counter, standing like a statue. "You're adapting," he said softly as I approached. I didn't respond. I just slid my time card into the machine. Clunk. Another piece of myself deposited into the diner's ledger. Traldi didn't offer further commentary. His gaze followed me for a few seconds longer. Then he retreated into his office, the door clicking shut behind him. I exhaled slowly. The weight settled on my shoulders again, an invisible growing pressure I had come to recognize. The first hour unfolded like the others, polishing, rearranging, cleaning surfaces that didn't need it. All mechanical, all designed to keep my mind from wandering too far into questions I didn't want answers to. But tonight, it was different. I could feel it in my bones. At 1:12 a.m. sharp, the jukebox stirred back to life, almost as if it were following its own ritual alongside me. The soft hiss of static came first, then the warped melody, the same song from the previous night, but slower now, more distorted. The singer's voice cracked like brittle leaves underfoot, notes dragging as if being pulled through molasses. I froze, as I had been trained to do, and listened. But this time, the song kept going, longer than before. Minutes dragged like hours. My knees locked. My breath grew shallow. When the song finally wheezed to its end, the quiet felt heavier than ever. And then came the knock. It wasn't from the front door. It was behind me. I turned, slowly, dread hollowing out my chest. The sound came from the walk-in freezer. 3 sharp knocks, measured, deliberate. Do not enter the walk-in freezer between 2:17 and 2:34 a.m. Edit. If you hear knocking, do not answer. The rule pounded in my head like a war drum. I stepped away from the counter instinctively, my back pressing against the opposite wall as the freezer door sat several feet in front of me, closed. Silent again for a few tense moments. Then, another knock, slower this time. The urge to respond burned inside me, irrational and insistent. What if someone was trapped in there? What if this was a test? No. I squeezed my eyes shut, fists clenched at my sides, anchoring myself to the rules. When I opened my eyes again, the knocking had stopped. But something else was wrong. The air shifted. The room wasn't the same. The booths were no longer empty. They were full, every seat occupied. Rows of figures sat perfectly still, facing forward, hands resting neatly atop the tables, eyes locked dead ahead. They weren't moving. They weren't breathing. I hadn't seen them enter. They simply were. Their appearances varied: men, women, old, young, but all shared the same unnatural symmetry. Their faces mirrored perfect left to right, as if carved from the same template. Even their clothing, outdated by decades, looked frozen in time. 1,950s dresses, weathered workman's jackets, styles long gone. A low hum vibrated through the air, like static bleeding through an old television set. I backed toward the counter, my mind screaming to stay calm, to not engage. They didn't move. They only stared at me. I dared not meet their gazes directly, but I could feel their eyes drilling into my skull, their smiles slowly spreading, mechanical, forced, like stretched rubber. The bell above the door didn't ring. They hadn't come through the entrance. They had simply appeared, as if peeled into existence. The phone rang. The shrill chime of the landline cut through the suffocating silence. I lunged for it, grateful for any distraction, any rule I could follow. I snatched the receiver and pressed it to my ear. Nothing but static at first. Then, layered beneath the crackling, a familiar voice. Female this time, soft but cold. "Alvin," she whispered, "you shouldn't have looked." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the receiver, my breath catching in my throat. The humming intensified. The fluorescent lights above flickered violently. Shadows bent in impossible angles along the walls, contorting unnaturally, as if something beneath the diner's surface was shifting. I was no longer alone, but I hadn't been alone for a long time. As my mind spun, I caught sight of movement from my peripheral vision. In the chrome reflection of the napkin dispenser, I saw them. The crowd wasn't sitting anymore. They were standing. Every figure had risen from their seats in perfect synchronization, bodies eerily rigid, their heads tilting slightly as they stared in my direction. The humming morphed into faint whispers, layered voices speaking in disjointed echoes I couldn't fully comprehend. Words overlapped, blending into a discordant chant that wrapped around my skull like a tightening noose. I backed further against the counter, my pulse pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The lights above the booths pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I glanced toward the office door, still closed. No sign of Traldi, no help coming. My legs screamed for me to run, but I was frozen. And then, as suddenly as it began, they stopped. The figures stood perfectly still, their mouths widening again into those impossible grins, as if mocking my terror. The jukebox clicked again, whirring to life. A new song began to play. A warped lullaby, its melody unbearably slow, as though time itself was trying to collapse in on me. I squeezed my eyes shut, clenching my fists so tightly my knuckles burned. When I finally dared open my eyes again, the booths were empty, as if none of them had ever been there at all. The moment the booths cleared, I staggered forward, my legs weak beneath me. My palms were slick with sweat. My breathing was uneven, every inhale tight, as though the air itself had thickened, clinging to my lungs. But the diner was calm again, as if it hadn't just tried to consume me. I rubbed my eyes, hoping, foolishly, that some of what I'd seen could be explained away by exhaustion, stress, sleep deprivation, hallucination. Anything but the truth my gut already accepted. The jukebox powered down with a soft mechanical whine. The lights stabilized. The humming stopped. But the silence that followed was far worse. It was the kind of silence that dared me to believe nothing had happened, that I had imagined all of it. But I knew better. I glanced toward Troldy's office door. It remained closed, like always. He was in there, watching, waiting, letting it play out. He knew. He had always known. My shift continued like a slow march toward some invisible cliff. The minutes dragged. The clock ticked like a metronome meant to measure my sanity instead of time. Each tick hammered inside my skull louder than the one before. Then came the real test. At precisely 3:00 a.m., I heard it again. The knock. It came not from the freezer this time, but from the front door. Soft at first, polite even, like someone waiting patiently for service. I turned, my mouth instantly dry. There he was, the man in the brown coat, standing under the flickering neon light, right where I'd seen him before. His silhouette was identical, his stance rigid, his presence still wrong, still other. But this time, something had shifted in him too. He didn't knock again right away. He just stood there, head tilted, watching me. The light played across his coat in strange ways. The layer of dust or ash clung thicker tonight, giving him a faint, ghostly aura. He lifted his hand again, slow, deliberate, and pressed his palm flat against the glass. Perfectly smooth. No fingerprints. No humanity. The rule screamed inside me. Do not, under any circumstance, let the man in the brown coat enter. My throat tightened. The man's lips moved, though his voice seemed to bypass the barrier of glass altogether, reaching my ears with impossible clarity. Alvin, he spoke softly, almost like a lullaby. You don't need to be afraid. I didn't respond. You know me, he continued, his tone warm, inviting. You've always known me. His head tilted further, and for the first time a flicker of something personal twisted in his words. It's exhausting, isn't it? He whispered. The rules, the fear, the waiting. Let me end it. My legs weakened. My grip on the counter tightened. He could see my hesitation. You're tired, he said gently. So tired, let me help. I shook my head, barely able to muster the strength. You don't belong here, Alvin, he insisted. You never did. The words dug into me, because part of me wanted to believe him, because part of me feared he might be right. Then his tone changed, subtle, almost pitying. You're starting to forget, he said, aren't you? I froze, because he wasn't entirely wrong. In the corners of my mind there were gaps, little voids where details should have been. Things about my life before Redwood, things about how I even ended up here, names, faces, days. It was like a fog creeping further in every night I returned. I can remind you, he offered. All you have to do is open the door. I clenched my jaw. The lights above me flickered violently, casting the diner in bursts of light and shadow. The humming returned, louder this time, vibrating through the floor beneath my feet. You're not supposed to be here, he said again, softer. You've stayed too long. Then he shifted, only slightly, but enough to make my stomach lurch. For a brief moment, his frame twisted unnaturally beneath the coat. His shoulders elongated, his spine bent at an angle no human could hold. The coat bulged, as though something far larger than his frame struggled to contain itself beneath the fabric. It was wearing a man's shape, but it wasn't a man. I backed away, forcing my eyes down, refusing to meet his gaze any longer. Clock out, I whispered to myself. The rule. The only rule that could save me now. Leave before sunrise. Always clock out. I stumbled toward the punch clock, my heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. My time card sat in its slot, waiting. The whispers behind me grew louder. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching again, though I didn't dare turn. They were back, filling the booths once more, standing, smiling, whispering. My fingers fumbled with the card. Focus! I shoved it into the machine. Clunk! The mechanical stamp punched through the silence like gunfire, and just like that, the humming stopped. The whispers died. The lights steadied. I turned. The booths were empty again. The man in the brown coat was gone, but the echo of his voice lingered in my mind like smoke trapped in a sealed room. You're forgetting, Alvin. Traldi appeared in the office doorway as though summoned by the punch clock's chime. His eyes settled on me, expression unreadable, hands calmly folded behind his back. You made the right choice, he said simply. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I staggered toward the door, my head spinning. As I stepped outside, the pale gray of pre-dawn bled across the horizon, but even the promise of daylight felt hollow now. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, staring at the diner through the windshield. I had survived another night. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like debt. And the longer I stayed, the more certain I became that one day soon, I wouldn't be able to clock out in time. The diner was waiting for me long before I pulled into the lot. By now, I could feel it from miles away, an invisible thread pulling at my ribs, guiding me back, tightening each night, like a spider gently drawing its prey into the center of its web. The neon sign buzzed faintly as I arrived, but tonight it looked dimmer, as if it too had grown weary. The familiar red glow bled weakly into the night air, barely cutting through the dense mist that had rolled in across the empty lot. I sat in the driver's seat longer than usual, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the faint tremor in my fingers. The voices from the night before still scratched at the edges of my mind like claws behind glass. That voice in particular. "You're forgetting, Alvin." The worst part was, I couldn't deny it. Pieces of my life outside this place had started slipping from me like sand through my fingers. Entire conversations I no longer remembered having. Names I once knew now felt unfamiliar on my tongue. Even my apartment felt like a distant hotel room I was only temporarily occupying. I was becoming part of it. I knew that now. But I also knew I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. I forced myself out of the car, stepping into the heavy air. The diner door creaked open under my hand, and I was swallowed once again by that familiar quiet. The booze, the counter, the humming refrigeration units, all exactly where I'd left them. Time didn't move inside Redwood Diner. It only waited. Trolley stood behind the counter as always. His suit remained immaculate, his tie sharp and detached. "You're back," he said, as though there had ever been any question. I said nothing as I clocked in. The time clock stamped my card with a mechanical punch that felt increasingly ceremonial. Trolley offered no small talk. He didn't need to. His presence was no longer supervisory. It was supervisory in the way a warden watches prisoners. Distant, inevitable. As the shift began, I moved through my duties automatically, hands performing tasks my brain barely registered. Wipe the counter, rearrange the condiments, refill the napkin holders. Always the same dance. But something was different tonight. The air tasted heavier, metallic. The lights above flickered more than usual. The hum of the refrigeration unit was slightly off pitch, just enough to set my teeth on edge, and then I noticed it. For the first time since I started working here, there were no truckers. Not even the silent ones who came in, ordered black coffee and grilled cheese, paid exact change and left without a word. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. The diner was empty, completely and utterly mine, and whatever else might have been watching. At 1:12 a.m., right on schedule, the jukebox clicked to life. The warped melody oozed from its speakers like smoke, curling through the air, wrapping around my spine. This time, the voice in the song was almost unrecognizable, slurred, distorted, dragging syllables out into long, warbled echoes. Every note sounded as though it were drowning, submerged beneath some invisible weight. I froze, as always, obeying. The longer I listened, the more the melody shifted. Notes collapsed in on themselves, pitch bending and folding like broken metal, creating something less like music and more like ritual. The jukebox wasn't playing for me. It was summoning. When the last note fizzled into silence, I felt it before I saw it. A shift, a pressure in the air, like the moment before a lightning strike. I turned, and the booths were no longer empty. They were full. Again. Every seat occupied by the same symmetrical, silent patrons as before. Men, women, children, each one frozen in place, their eyes locked forward, hands resting neatly on the tables. But tonight, their clothing looked older, like they had stepped out of different decades. 1930s, 1940s, 1970s, their faces unnervingly similar. Like someone had photocopied a human face and made small adjustments for variety. None of them breathed, none of them blinked. I stood paralyzed, cold sweat rolling down my back. The bell above the door chimed softly. The woman in the yellow dress had returned. Table 5. She walked, not floated, not teleported, but walked gracefully to her seat, as if nothing were unnatural about any of this. Her hands folded gently in her lap once more. Her dress was pristine, pressed perfectly, her skin pale as porcelain under the flickering lights. I followed the rule. I prepared a glass of water. My hand shook slightly as I carried it to her table, keeping my eyes fixed downward, focusing on the cracks in the wood as I placed the glass before her. I turned immediately to retreat, but before I could take my second step away, I heard her voice for the first time, barely a whisper, but sharp enough to slice through my thoughts. "You're late." My chest seized. The air around me dropped several degrees. The condensation from the refrigeration unit thickened instantly, frosting over nearby chrome fixtures. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Her voice again, softer, closer. "Don't make me wait again." I dared not turn around. Instead, I backed away carefully until I reached the counter, hands gripping its edge until my knuckles blanched white. The patrons remained still, but their heads now slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to turn toward me, one by one, like clock hands ticking in unison. Their eyes were blank, their mouths stretched into those terrible, unnatural smiles. The humming returned, a low vibration beneath the floor, under my ribs, in my teeth. The phone rang. I lunged for it like a drowning man reaching for air. I snatched up the receiver, pressing it to my ear, desperate for direction, for any anchor to cling to. Static crackled for a moment before Trouty's voice cut through, calm as ever. "Stay where you are, do not run." I swallowed hard, my mouth was bone dry. "But do not engage them," he interrupted. My voice trembled. "What do they want?" A pause. "To see who forgets first." Then the line went dead. The humming intensified. The figures stood, all of them, perfectly synchronized, their smiles wide, their eyes hollow, and they waited. I closed my eyes, gripping the counter harder, forcing myself not to scream. I obeyed. Because the rules weren't just for surviving, the rules were tests, and I wasn't ready to fail yet. The humming never truly stopped. It was alive beneath my skin now, vibrating somewhere deep in my bones. As the night dragged its claws across the floor of the diner, the silent audience that had filled the booths remained standing, eyes fixed on me with impossible precision, their mouths stretched wide in those hideous symmetrical grins. I could feel them breathing, though I heard no breath. I didn't dare move. Not yet. Every second that passed felt like a negotiation I wasn't allowed to participate in. Their eyes weren't just watching me, they were weighing me, judging. Behind me, the fluorescent lights buzzed, flickering in and out, casting fractured shadows across the linoleum. The diner's silhouettes twitched slightly with every burst of failing light, as though something beneath their skin was beginning to shift and writhe, trying to push its way out. The phone didn't ring again, the jukebox didn't restart. Even the woman at table 5 sat perfectly still now, head gently tilted toward me. Though I couldn't see her face, I could feel the weight of her smile digging into the back of my skull like a hot needle. Then, as though commanded by something unheard, the entire crowd moved as one. Their hands dropped to their sides, their feet shuffled forward in perfect unison. Silent. Mechanical. They were approaching. The air grew colder with every synchronized step. My pulse hammered violently against my temples. I gripped the counter until my fingertips screamed from the pressure. One step. Another. Another. The humming in my ears grew sharp, like electricity slicing through nerve endings. They were closing in. My chest burned with each breath, and my brain screamed one singular command. Run. But Trolldy's words echoed louder. Do not run. And somehow I knew. If I moved, if I ran, it wouldn't just break the rule. It would invite them in. They wanted the chase. They wanted panic. They wanted me to break first. The whispers started, soft at first, then louder. Dozens of voices layered over one another. Some male, some female, some whispering, others chanting in a broken rhythm like old records skipping at different speeds. Alvin, you don't belong here. We remember you. You're forgetting. Their voices vibrated inside my head, each word cutting like razors across frayed nerves. My vision narrowed, my knees threatened to buckle, and still, I didn't move. Another synchronized step. They were less than 10 feet from the counter now. Then, All at once, they stopped, frozen again. The humming dropped into a low, steady drone, barely audible. The voices ceased instantly, like a curtain yanked closed mid-sentence. For a moment, there was nothing but the soft mechanical tick of the wall clock over the office door. The time, 3:33 a.m., the worst hour, the time the diner seemed to breathe on its own. The woman in the yellow dress spoke again, her voice cutting through the silence like a thin blade. "You're closer now." I shivered, unable to respond. "You hear them clearer each night," she continued, her voice honeyed, but laced with something ancient beneath the surface. "Soon, you won't need rules." Her voice was not meant to comfort. It was meant to coax, to erode the last thread of self I was clinging to. "Oh, remember," she whispered. I clenched my teeth, gripping the counter harder. The figures remained still, but their smiles began to widen further, their jaws stretching in slow, jerky increments like something inside was pulling the skin taut from within. I couldn't stop shaking. "Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Stay where you are." The mantra looped in my head, Traldi's voice an anchor in a sea of static. And then, like someone flipping a switch, the entire scene reversed. The figures stepped backward in unison. One step, another, returning to their booths, sitting down perfectly, folding their hands once again, staring forward like mannequins reset on display. The humming faded, the light steadied. My breath came in ragged gasps, sweat pooling beneath my shirt as if my entire body had been submerged underwater. And then came the knock. Not at the door, not at the freezer. It came from inside the office. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. My eyes darted toward the closed door. My mind spun. Traldi was supposed to be in there. But no sound followed, no movement, just silence behind the thin wooden door, except for that soft, mechanical tick of the clock above it. I swallowed hard, every instinct at war. Was this another test? Another rule I didn't know? I wasn't supposed to enter the office. No rule mentioned it. But something about that knock felt wrong. The knock came again, slower this time. I stayed rooted, refusing to answer, refusing to move. Moments stretched into what felt like hours, and then finally the office door creaked open on its own. Empty. The light inside flickered softly, casting shadows across the vacant desk. There was no sign of Traldi, but my time card was there, already pulled halfway from its slot, waiting for me. An invitation, or a warning. I approached slowly, every step feeling like it might split the air in half. As I reached for the card, my reflection flickered in the glass frame of the time clock. For the briefest moment, my face was not my own. It was smiling, wide, unnatural, the exact same smile they all wore. I blinked and it was gone. My hand trembled as I shoved the card into the machine. Clunk. The mechanical stamp echoed like a gunshot. The booths emptied in an instant. The woman in the yellow dress vanished. The humming died. The clock ticked normally again. The diner returned to its usual emptiness, like nothing had ever happened. But something had changed. As I turned toward the door, Traldi was suddenly there, waiting, as if he'd been watching the whole time. "You're learning," he said. I stared at him, my voice brittle. "Where were you?" His smile was thin, measured. Not everywhere needs to be explained. The door opened behind him. Dawn was breaking. The first sliver of sun peeked over the horizon, bleeding pale light across the asphalt. I stepped outside, but I didn't feel free. I felt closer. Closer to whatever waited inside, closer to whatever they wanted me to become. The pull was stronger now. By the 5th night, it was no longer just a job pulling me back to the Redwood Diner. It was gravity, a force that wrapped around my ribs and guided my every breath. Every mile I drove toward the edge of Black Hollow felt shorter than the night before, as though the distance was folding inward, drawing me closer with invisible hands. The mist hung low over the parking lot again, thicker this time. It swallowed my car as I rolled into the same empty space, headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the dense white wall. The diner waited, its neon sign pulsing dimly, flickering in arrhythmic spasms like a failing heartbeat. Even the lights seemed tired. The glass doors reflected my face back at me as I approached. But for a fraction of a second, as the neon sputtered, my reflection did not move in sync. It smiled before I did. I blinked, and it was gone. But my gut twisted as I pulled open the door and stepped inside. Nothing had changed. The booths stood empty. The counter gleamed under flickering fluorescence. The jukebox waited silently in the corner like an ancient witness, and behind the counter, as always, was Traldi. He greeted me with the same quiet nod, as if nothing about the escalating horror warranted acknowledgement. "You're early tonight," he said. His voice was steady, but something behind his eyes had shifted, less detached, almost expectant. I slid my time card into the clock. Clunk. The punch echoed louder than it should have. As the card slid back into its slot, I stared at my own name printed at the top. The letters looked foreign to me now, like the name belonged to someone I used to know, Alvin Mercer. The more nights I spent inside these walls, the less certain I was that I was still Alvin at all. Raleigh watched me for a moment longer than usual, then disappeared into his office without another word. The air felt heavier tonight, denser. I moved through my opening routine with robotic efficiency, wiping already sterile counters, refilling condiment holders that didn't need it, pretending the mundane rhythm still meant something. But nothing about tonight would be routine, because tonight I would break the pattern. It was no longer enough to simply survive. The questions gnawed at me with teeth sharper than fear. What is this place? Why me? And who? No, what is Traldi? My mind kept returning to that knock on the office door the night before, from inside. I hadn't told anyone, but I didn't have to. The diner already knew. As the clock inched toward 1:12, my skin crawled. My pulse quickened. Right on schedule, the jukebox flickered to life. But this time it was different. There was no song, no melody, no warbled old tune from some forgotten decade. Instead, only static hissed from the speakers, like a broken radio stuck between frequencies. Beneath the static, faint voices whispered in fragmented phrases, as if dozens of conversations overlapped in reverse. He's still here, not ready, closer now. It remembers. The voices overlapped, folded in on each other until they became one shrill frequency that bored into my skull. My hands pressed against my temples as the pitch climbed higher, higher, until the speakers abruptly cut out with a final pop. Silence returned, but the ringing in my ears remained. Then, the bell above the door chimed. The woman in the yellow dress entered like always, gliding to table 5 as if walking a memorized path. Her movements were smoother tonight, less mechanical, almost confident. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and waited. I retrieved the glass automatically, filled it with water, and carried it toward her table, my gaze locked downward. The rules still mattered, at least for now, but as I placed the glass on the table, her voice slipped under my skin. "You're close, Alvin." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "I can feel you remembering." The chill in the air deepened, the moisture from the refrigeration units frosting over the chrome edges of the counter behind me. "You've been here before," she whispered. My hands trembled. "No," I managed. My voice cracked. I just started here." Her smile widened, impossibly wide, as if stretching past the limits of her own skin. "That's the lie you tell yourself." The lights above us flickered violently, casting her porcelain features into jerking flashes of shadow. The rest of the diner remained silent, but I could feel them watching. The patrons, the ones who shouldn't exist. I turned to retreat, but before I could, her voice lashed out again. "You were always part of this." I stumbled back to the counter, gripping its edge, trying to keep my head from spinning. The woman remained seated, but her smile no longer wavered. The air shifted again, and then the booths filled instantly, like the blink of an eye. The silent audience returned, every seat occupied by those same hollow-eyed figures, their expressions identical, their mouths beginning to stretch again into those wide, frozen smiles. But tonight their faces looked more familiar. Their features weren't as random as before. Some of them looked like me, not exactly, but close. Subtle variations, older versions, slight differences in jawlines, haircuts, scars I didn't have. Yet, copies, failed copies. My stomach twisted. The humming beneath the floor resumed, deeper than ever. The walls seemed to flex and pulse like a living lung, breathing in tandem with my accelerating heartbeat. The phone rang. I lunged for it. "Stay calm." Charlie's voice came through instantly. "It's almost over." "Almost over? What's happening to me?" I gasped, my throat tightening. "You're close to remembering," he said calmly, almost soothing. "And once you do, you'll understand why you're still here." I could barely speak. "What am I supposed to remember?" There was a long pause before he answered. "The night you first arrived." The line went dead. I lowered the receiver slowly, my blood roaring in my ears. The night I first arrived. My knees weakened. Because I couldn't remember it. Not fully. Just flashes, a job posting, a phone call, an offer I accepted without question, but beyond that, blankness. Like the tape of my memory had been cut and spliced. The humming intensified. The figures in the booths leaned forward in perfect unison, smiles widening again. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was here to survive anymore. I was here to finish something I had already begun. The ringing in my head wouldn't stop. Even as the phone line went dead, the echo of Charlie's words gnawed inside me. "The night you first arrived." But there was no arrival. Not one I could recall. No drive, no interview, no first shift, only rules. The humming beneath the floorboards grew heavier, vibrating through my shoes, through my spine. The crowd filling the booths leaned in closer, synchronized as though sharing a single mind. Their faces, those near copies of me, stared with wide, empty eyes, their mouths stretching wider with every passing second. I gripped the edge of the counter as if it were the only thing anchoring me to reality. Then the lights shifted. For the first time since I started here, the neon glow outside sputtered and died. The diner dimmed, swallowed in a pale, unnatural light, emanating from nowhere, as though the building itself glowed faintly from within. The woman in the yellow dress rose. Her movement was slow, graceful, fluid in a way that defied human joints, like she was being lifted by invisible threads rather than walking under her own power. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her gaze pinned me to the floor. The hum shifted pitch again, higher now, like something winding tighter with every breath. "You were always part of this. You never left." The whispers crawled up the walls, seeping into my ears. I couldn't tell if they were inside my head or bleeding directly from the walls. I stumbled backward toward the office door. Traldi's door. Closed, but not locked. Not tonight. I slammed my hand against the knob, twisting it open and pulling the door wide. Cold air spilled out like a draft from some long-sealed crypt. The office wasn't as I remembered. The desk was still there, as was the time clock mounted to the back wall. But the walls, once simple beige, were now covered in layers of overlapping documents. Time cards. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All identical, all bearing my name. Alvin Mercer, rows upon rows. Each one stamped with different dates, some from nights I remembered, some from nights I hadn't lived. Yet, others bore dates that hadn't come to pass. I stumbled deeper into the office, my breath fogging in the frigid air. Pinned beneath the layers of cards were photographs, grainy black and white photos, old Polaroids. Each one showed the diner from different decades, different eras, and in every single one, I was there. Sometimes behind the counter, sometimes at a table, sometimes standing outside beneath the flickering neon sign. Always me, the same face, the same eyes, but not always the same age. I staggered closer, reaching for one photograph, a picture dated 1978. There I was, standing behind the counter, identical to how I appeared now. My head reeled. The humming spiked again, rattling the framed glass of the clock. The diners outside whispered louder. "You've always belonged. The rules kept you here. You made the rules." The words didn't make sense. My heart pounded. My skin felt thin, too tight against my bones. The reflection in the time clock's glass twisted. For a fraction of a second, I saw my own face shift. Skin pale, eyes hollow, smile stretching unnaturally wide, the same as the copies sitting outside like the others waiting the booths, waiting for me to join them. My breath came sharp and quick. I turned back toward the office doorway, where she stood. The woman in the yellow dress blocked my exit, hands still folded neatly over one another, head slightly tilted as she regarded me. "You were always meant to stay," she said gently, her voice melodic and sweet like poisoned honey. "You've come so far." I couldn't stop shaking. What am I?" Her eyes sparkled with something ancient. "You are what remains when the others fail." I shook my head violently. "No, you followed the rules longer than any before you, and so you've been allowed to remain whole." Her words felt like hooks sinking into my flesh. "Others broke the rules," she continued softly. "They joined the seats you see now." I stumbled backward toward the far wall, my shoulders striking the cold surface as my legs weakened beneath me. "No," I whispered again. I was hired. I answered an ad. You called me." Her smile widened. "Did I?" The truth crashed through me like ice water. There had been no ad, no phone call, no interview, only rules. I hadn't been hired. I had always been here. The hum crescendoed into a deafening pitch, the very walls of the diner trembling beneath it. The diners outside rose in unison again, standing at attention, their heads tilted toward the office like marionettes awaiting their cue. "You were always one of us," she whispered. I covered my ears, desperate to block out the sound, but it was inside me now, vibrating through my bones. My vision blurred. The photographs around me bled together, overlapping like layers of decayed film. Endless versions of myself trapped here, cycling through the same endless shift. The booths, the rules, the watchers, the smiling woman. Trolley, endless, unbroken. I collapsed to my knees. The woman in yellow stepped forward, reaching out a hand as though to steady me. "Don't fight it anymore," she cooed. The others didn't fight. They accepted their place. I trembled beneath her shadow. My fingers brushed against the nearest time card. My name, over and over and over. The humming reached its final pitch, and then, without warning, the clock stopped. The hands froze. 3:33 a.m. Everything went silent. No humming, no whispers, no movement. The woman in yellow paused, her expression faltering for the first time. In the stillness, I heard a soft click behind me. The time clock. The card slot ejected one final card. A fresh one. Blank, no name. Only a timestamp waiting to be printed. My heart pounded. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't supposed to be trapped. I was supposed to replace someone. And someone had finally left. The blank time card trembled in my hand. The humming had stopped, but its absence was worse. The silence pressed against my eardrums, dense and suffocating, like the air itself was trying to crush me. The woman in the yellow dress stood mere feet away, her smile faltering for the first time. Her eyes, once glittering with unshakable confidence, now narrowed with something sharper, worry, or perhaps annoyance. The booths remained full. My copies stood frozen, their wide eyes and stretched mouths unmoving. They weren't watching anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for me. The blank card was cold, smooth, heavier than paper had any right to feel. A new shift. A new cycle, another me. I forced myself upright, legs shaking beneath me, using the counter as leverage. The truth hadn't just cracked open. It had been screaming at me for nights, and I was too blind, too obedient to hear it. There had never been a hiring process. Never a choice. There was only this machine, This system, pulling people inside and carving them hollow, feeding on repetition, on obedience, on rules. The time clock clicked softly behind me, like it was breathing, waiting to stamp the card, waiting to lock me inside again. But the question that gnawed at me louder than anything was, who had just left? Because for the machine to prepare a new card, someone had to clock out, and someone, until now, had never left. The woman in yellow stepped forward. "Put it in, Alvin," she whispered, voice tender like a mother soothing a frightened child. "Accept your place. There's no one left to fight." I clenched the card tighter, my knuckles blanching. "What happens if I refuse?" Her smile returned, but it was colder now, mechanical. "You can't refuse. You were chosen because you endured. You obeyed. You belong here." The booths behind her stirred now, ever so slightly. I glanced at their faces again. My faces. Some younger, some older. Each version wore the same stretched grin, but beneath the eyes was something else. Something broken. Resigned. Or worse, relieved. I was not their guest. I was their replacement. Every time one of us forgot too much, collapsed into the system entirely, the diner found another copy, another shift, another role to fill. The rules weren't for survival. The rules were for containment. A distant metallic groan rippled through the floor, as if the diner itself were shifting in response to my hesitation. The walls flexed slightly, impossible angles bending as though reality was fighting to hold its shape. "You have lasted longer than the others," the woman continued, taking another step closer. "That's why you see more than they did. That's why you're still whole." I shook my head. "Whole?" My voice cracked. "I don't even remember who I was before this." "Exactly." Her eyes softened like she pitied me. "The forgetting is mercy." The humming threatened to return, a low vibration beginning to rise from beneath the floor. I backed toward the office door again, toward the time clock, toward the growing noise behind my skull. And then, the office lights flickered, the clock shifted, the minute hand ticked, 3:34. AM. I froze. The rules had never spoken of what happened after 3:33/3:34. The woman paused too, head tilting, smile dimming just slightly. "This is not how it's supposed to go," she whispered. The booth occupants twitched, a sharp convulsion that rattled them like puppets with tangled strings. The diner groaned again. Something was breaking, or waking. A loud crack split the air as one of the overhead fluorescent bulbs burst, showering sparks across the counter. I gripped the blank time card tighter. If I submitted, if I stamped this card, I wouldn't just start another shift. I would become one of them. And this time, I wouldn't remember. The humming spiked as another light exploded above us. The woman in yellow's smile finally broke entirely. "You don't understand, Alvin," she hissed, her voice warping, layers beneath it unraveling like voices stacked atop each other. "You were never meant to know." Her skin quivered slightly, the perfect porcelain sheen rippling as if something inside her form struggled to keep its shape. "You think there's a way out?" she snarled, "but you are already inside." I stumbled back toward the clock. And then, from behind me, the door to the kitchen creaked open. I whipped my head toward it. Standing in the doorway was me, but not a reflection, not a copy. A version of me far older, gray creeping into my beard, eyes hollow but conscious, hands trembling. My own voice, hoarse, whispered, "Don't clock in." My chest caved, my breath stilled. The older version took a step forward, his voice stronger now, urgent. "You've done this before," he said. "Dozens of times, hundreds. I tried to stop it before. You're further than I ever was. You're still you." The woman hissed, her voice bending impossibly low. "Lies!" I stared at my future self, my jaw locked. "How?" I managed. He shook his head. "You break the cycle when you don't play the game. The card resets it. Don't feed the clock. Step away." The humming reached a violent pitch. the booths convulsing behind the woman. She shrieked, her face cracking slightly, revealing something darker beneath her skin, writhing shadows eager to burst free. "You will obey," she roared, voice distorting into something monstrous. The walls trembled, and for a moment, I thought the entire diner might collapse inward. The time card in my hand trembled. The clock pulsed like a beating heart. One choice, 1 second. I looked at my older self. His eyes pleaded, raw and desperate. "You're still you," he whispered again. "For now." The time card pulsed in my hand like it was alive, like it wanted me to submit. Its weight was no longer that of paper. It was something denser, heavier, soaked in every previous shift I had survived, in every version of myself that had surrendered before me. The diner shook. The ceiling lights exploded one by one, raining down sparks that danced across the linoleum floor like fireflies from some terrible dimension. The booths writhed, my countless reflections convulsing in perfect sync, as though tethered to one consciousness struggling against collapse. "You will clock in." The woman's voice wasn't hers anymore. It was layered, vibrating with dozens of twisted frequencies beneath, like the voices of all who had come before me were being funneled through her broken mouth. Her perfect skin tore like fabric stretched beyond its limits, revealing brief flashes of something black and coiling beneath. Limbs twitched unnaturally beneath the yellow dress, shifting as though more arms tried to push free from inside. My future self stepped closer, his hand reaching out, not for the card, but for me. "This is your window, Alvin," he said, voice trembling but resolute. "Every loop we fail makes her stronger. Every time one of us clocks in, she feeds. The diner feeds." The woman screamed. The windows along the far wall cracked, spiderweb fractures racing across the glass like veins of some sick creature. The time clock beside me ticked again, 3:35 a.m. The humming had turned to a deep guttural groan beneath the diner, like something enormous was stirring below our feet, growing restless as its meal resisted. I stared at my older self. "I don't know how to stop it," I whispered. "You already have," he said. "By making it this far, you remembered." His eyes filled with desperation. "Now you have to choose." The woman's fractured face twisted in fury. "You are mine, Alvin," she shrieked. "You always were." Behind her, the copies began to split apart, some collapsing into piles of ash, others glitching like broken projections, stuttering forward and back in flickers of motion that hurt my eyes to watch. The diner's very foundation seemed to warp, as if reality was folding in on itself. The weight of centuries of failure hung in the air. I raised the card, and then I let it go. The blank card fluttered like a dead leaf as it slipped from my fingers and landed on the floor, its soft paper thud lost beneath the roaring collapse. The time clock screamed, an electronic howl that shouldn't have been possible, as though denying its own starvation. Sparks burst from its frame, smoke poured from its slot. The humming fractured, the groaning below ceased. The diner trembled violently. The woman lunged, her form unraveling mid-stride, limbs twisting into grotesque, elongated shapes, her face splitting into jagged mouths that opened and closed out of sync. But she never reached me, because the light returned. It wasn't the diner's flickering fluorescence, nor the tired neon outside. It was something older, purer. A searing pale light burst from behind me, washing through the office and into the dining area like a tidal wave. It swallowed the booths, dissolving my reflections into smoke, scattering the whispers into silence. The woman shrieked as her form disintegrated mid-step, her voice rising into a final inhuman pitch before it was consumed entirely. Then came stillness, real stillness. The humming was gone. The walls no longer breathed. The diner stood, quiet, empty. For the first time, the faint light of dawn crept through the cracked windows, casting muted gold beams across overturned chairs and scorched wires. The neon sign outside remained dark. The familiar oppressive weight in my chest had lifted, leaving only exhaustion behind. My older self stood across from me, breathing heavily. "You broke it," he whispered. His voice shook, not with fear but relief. I looked at him, still trying to understand. What happens now? His eyes darted toward the time clock, now blackened and dead. The blank card lay curled on the floor beneath it, untouched. Now, he said softly, you leave. I followed his gaze toward the front door. For the first time since I arrived, it stood wide open. No invisible pull, no locking mechanism, no heavy metal bolt sealed shut, just open. I stepped forward on shaky legs. You? I asked, looking back. He offered a tired smile. I don't get to leave. Before I could respond, his form flickered. Briefly, I saw it. The layers of him, the echoes of all the versions that came before. Dozens, hundreds, each trapped within the diner's cycle, each of them failing to do what I had somehow managed. But not anymore. The diner had lost its grip. He faded into nothing. I stood alone now. For a long moment, I lingered in the threshold, staring into the rising sun as its light bled over the empty parking lot. And then I stepped outside. The door didn't slam behind me. There was no gust of wind, no final trick. Only stillness. Only freedom. The weight of the night lifted as I walked away, the asphalt warm beneath my shoes. The air smelled different now. Clean, natural, as though the fog that had gripped Black Hollow for so long was finally breaking. But even as the distance grew, I knew some part of the diner still remained behind me. And somewhere, waiting for another fool too curious to resist, too desperate to question the pay rate, those rules still sat, still written, still ready. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey through the rules of Redwood Diner. If this story left you questioning the price of obedience, the terror of routine, and the thin line between survival and surrender, you're not alone. Some places don't trap you with chains. They trap you with repetition. And sometimes, the scariest rules are the ones you willingly follow. If you enjoyed this story and want more twisted tales, eerie mysteries, and psychological horrors that linger long after the screen fades to black, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new nightmare. Thank you for watching, and remember, always check the rules before you clock in.